to another episode of the Petey Performance Podcast. Another solo episode for you guys this week. It's quite a big week for me, I would say, and I didn't think I would have time over the last couple of weeks to schedule in a guest episode, but we have a very big guest coming next week for you guys, so you have that to look forward to. I'm actually traveling down to Waterford on Thursday, so that will give you an inkling as to who we're going to get on. A big week this week because at the weekend I'm going to be heading over to Leeds, my beloved Leeds, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be getting to a Leeds United game. I am heading over for the Sportsmith Speed Conference with tons of phenomenal guest speakers and presenters and coaches from team sports, from athletics, from the States, from Europe, from all over the world. So really, really looking forward to that. As well as that, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the season now. We're almost finished March and what would be typically termed a preseason period, where we've been pushing the players quite hard. So we are still pushing the players hard. We are still attempting to improve a lot of physical qualities, and we are stressing the players to adapt in that regard for sure. But we are getting to a stage soon where we may have to back off a tiny bit more frequently and allow them to realize their potential a little bit. As well as that, we're moving into the phases of the season where we're going to have to start focusing more on technical and tactical demands. So my role as the S&C coach / performance coach will shift, because obviously physical performance is incredibly important and we want to be performing at an optimal level in terms of our physical prowess. But the psychology of coaching and the psychology of being in the optimal mental state to perform, as well as touching all of the different areas that you need to touch as an athlete to be the best that you possibly can be on the field, is becoming of a higher importance as the importance that is placed on each game that comes week on week increases. And that is something that I'm coming on today to talk about. Just a thought that I had on my morning walk this morning, which is generally when I have most of my most interesting thoughts, let's say. And it's something that I talk about quite a bit, and it's something that I see quite a lot of in the GAA especially, and with coaches and athletes, but in all different sports as well. And it's the idea that more work is not better. Better work is better. I think that a lot of problems are attempted to be solved with more volume by a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes. And more volume is not going to always solve any of the issues that you are experiencing or get you further and closer towards your goal of being the best that you can be. It's an easy get out, in my opinion. It's a bit of a... I'm not too keen on it, to be honest. I think just throwing volume at players is an easy out, and then you criticize them, well, you're not working hard enough. I don't think it's necessarily hard work, and the idea of doing more work is always going to lead to better athletes. Oftentimes, if you assess everything that you're currently doing, you're probably not being as laser focused and as diligent in the work that you're already doing to improve your performance to a higher level and to the level that is required. And I think it's a much more sensible and reasonable and actionable goal to attempt to improve the quality of what you are doing currently, rather than throwing more quantity at the issue. And I was reflecting on this due to the fact that a lot of my players in the past few weeks have been like, let's do more running at the end of training sessions. And I'll never knock you for wanting to do more running and wanting to do a few extras. In fact, I will always suggest that you're doing some extras in terms of your skill, in terms of your speed, your change of direction, but it's high quality extras rather than just more, if that makes sense. So on a number of occasions, I've had to stop the players and protect them from themselves and just question them. Well, like, are we going to get anything out of running more? Have we done enough of high quality? Have you passed the threshold with which you can still move within my technical framework or my technical model and move with high quality and precision in the movement that you're attempting to do, which in this case would be high speed running and conditioning? But if you can't hold the position and you're running like shit, it's not really worth a shit to go out and do more. It's probably going to predispose you to becoming injured down the line. And it's just mindless, really. It's just absolute doggedness for the sake of doggedness. And there is a lot to be said for having those hard sessions. Like, you're going to want to have those hard sessions. My job as the S&C coach or the head of athletic performance is to identify when are we best suited to putting those sessions in where we can push the players hard. But as well as that, just because we're pushing them hard doesn't mean that we have to do too much or we have to do huge volumes. Trying to maintain a certain posture or a certain technique continuously whilst running is going to be quite difficult, and you're going to feel that as an athlete, and you're going to see their RPEs going up, the better quality that they execute. As well as that, same thing in your speed work. If the intensity is there and they're really pushing the intensity of those sprints, then the RPE is going to go up, but the quality is also still there. So I don't think more is necessarily better. And I think, sure, it is deadly to even get out and practice more skills, but I think there's better value in kicking 10, 15, 20 balls purposefully than kicking 100 balls mindlessly. And those that know me will know that I've been through the ringer with this in terms of my own athletic career. In fact, I was a place kicker when I was playing rugby, and I read Johnny Wilkinson's autobiography, and I just thought that this was the Old Testament. I thought this was the how to become an effective goal kicker. So I just took it as scripture, went out and tried to practice it, and I would kick 6 days out of 7, sometimes 7 days a week. Unfortunately, even though I built up to doing that, your body generally isn't going to respond very favorably to doing that volume of kicking that frequently and that consistently. As well as that, I was probably kicking too many balls as well, in that I was going out and I was, because it's what I'd learned, I was not leaving a certain spot until I had kicked 3 over that spot straight through the post in a row. And shout out to my best friend Jack Feeney, he would do the same. And I don't think it's a positive mindset to hold that you have to be absolutely perfect every single time, because if your practice is perfect all of the time, you're not really challenging yourself. And I think this could be transferred over to GAA players and forwards in their shooting practice as well. If you're not missing and you're not making mistakes, you're not really challenging yourself too much. So I ended up having a good deal of groin inflammation and what they diagnose as osteitis pubis, which is basically a lot of hip pain for a very, very long time. And it left me on the sidelines for over a year, which was demoralizing, really. Like, and I hated it. And all I wanted to do was get back. But due to the resources that were at my disposal, nothing was working to get me back on the field. And I truly believe that now I would be able to solve the issue if it were to arise, and I'd be better able to solve the issue for players that would go through similar issues myself as a coach. It's probably one of the major reasons I got into coaching, as a fact. But when I did get back and I was still goal kicking, I had a much more rational approach to my goal kicking, I would say. And I actually was a lot better and a lot more successful as a goal kicker in those later years after I came back. And I decided, if I go for a kicking session, I will do my dropouts. I'll do 5 right, 5 left. That's all. I might kick a few out of hand. And then I will take 12 shots at goal. That's all, from various positions around the field. not sure if you can hear the seagulls here. We're right by the canal, so they're overhead. But I would kick those 12 shots, and because I knew that I only had 12, I would be a lot more purposeful and a lot more laser focused in executing them. As well as that, I kept a kicking notebook, similar to Matt Fitzpatrick does with his golf shots, and I would track every single shot at goal, if it went over, if it didn't go over, where it was from, and how close it went over to the black spot, if that makes sense. And I found that I improved a lot more from being so purposeful and in my practice than simply throwing volume at the issue and attempting to improve by hitting 100 kicks. And I think early on, when you're in a developmental state and you're a little bit younger, you will get value out of kicking 100 kicks. Like, as an example, when I was trying to improve my kicking out of hand from my left foot, I believe volume helped a lot in solving that issue by just doing kick and kick and kick, because I didn't yet have the feel for how the ball should feel flying off my left foot. And I think that solved a lot of issues. But as you get more proficient at executing a skill, you need to challenge yourself in different ways. And I think you'll only get the benefits from volume in the early stages of skill development, if I'm honest. I think you're better served in having that purposeful practice. And this comes back to what I speak about with coaches in terms of technical and tactical coaches and their ideas around how they structure their training. And I believe that just putting pressure on players to kick a crazy number of balls, whether it's shooting, whether it's punt kicking, passing, whether it's hand passing, whether it's catching, fielding, etc., is a lazy enough strategy to trying to improve their skill levels and their ability to play the game. So I've spoken before about my approach that I use, that I kind of took over from football, from soccer, in terms of tactical periodization. And I use a similar approach with skill development too, in that I'll get the coaches to write down all of the necessary skills that need to be worked on in isolation to improve our players' abilities on the field in terms of their ability to play their sport. And typically they'll come back with about 5 to 10 different skills, probably 5 to 8 realistically. And then I think a big issue is, if one isn't going well, coaches will revert back to working on that skill consistently, and they might nearly do too much and place too much emphasis on proving that skill. And then they will not give the necessary time to not only develop the abilities in the other skills, but also to retain the abilities in the other skills. So, for example, if you were to write down, say, catching, kick passing, shooting, and hand passing, just as an example, and you have 2 training sessions in a week as well as your game, then in a bi-weekly cycle, you will know that on the first Tuesday of that bi-weekly cycle, you're going to work on your kick passing. And you might pair that with the focus or the emphasis of that day's training session, whether you're focused on attack or transition to attack, it might pair well there. Then the next day, you might focus on your hand passing, and that might pair well with transition to defense or transition to attack. And then the following day, you might go with your shooting, and you might pair that with your attack focus day. And then defending, and you have your fielding in there in terms of defending. And you will attempt to improve your fielding and your catching in isolation, but also your drills and your games will be more focused on improving the team's ability to defend. And that is the kind of approach that I would use. Now, you're obviously going to have more than 4 skills that you're looking to improve, and players are going to want to do small bits of extra work. If they're a forward, they're not going to be happy, as I well know, with just one shooting focused day in 4. So that's when they put in their extras, but it doesn't need to be loads of extras. It can be 10, 15 minutes if they're up to the field before everybody else and they get out early. And 10, 15 minutes of purposeful practice is going to be better than doing a half an hour of rubbish. And using a progression in terms of your skill development and having a progression of drills and exercises and different games as well is very, very important as a coach. So a lot of this is in terms of structuring your training. And then if you structure your training effectively and you know when and where you're going to do and work on all of these things, as well as for how long you're going to do so, you'll find that the quality of your training will improve, the intensity of your training will improve, and you'll know that you can focus more on what you're doing, but also you can be more okay to leave it alone and trust that everything is going to plan and that all of the skills are being looked at and developed and that players are getting enough of each. So that comes back to what I was saying, in that more work is not inherently better and is not necessarily better. Better work is better. And it's something that I've been trying to come to terms with as an example in my golf game at the moment, in that if I go to the driving range, and you'll know that if you do play golf, they'll have maybe 2 or 3 different options in terms of the buckets of balls that you're going to buy at the driving range or you're going to rent. So you can get 60 or you can get 100. If I get 60 balls and I take my time and I focus in on the execution of the skill on each of those 60 balls, it's going to be better than if I get 100 balls and I just fly through them and smash them. You're going to get more out of that practice. And hopefully I'll be seeing that come to fruition in the future. I am seeing myself get better over the last month. I am seeing myself improve. And I think it is down to actually focusing on what I'm doing. Now, you can get out to golf and you can enjoy it and just have a chat, but I definitely am more focused in my process around each shot. I know what I have to do to execute that shot well, and it comes down to trusting the process that is tried and tested and practiced, and going through the different scenarios in my own practice and being more familiar with that scenario and that execution of that skill when it comes down to it in a match or in a competition or whatever I'm competing in. So in relation to more not being better as well, I think a lot of that comes down to and can apply to your speed training and your agility training and your change of direction training as well. When we talk about a microdose, it's a microdose. And sometimes athletes are surprised by how much I'll prescribe in terms of their microdose for speed pre-training session. They won't even understand that, look, you can get 4 exercises, 3-4 exercises here, 1 to 2 reps of each. And if you execute them to a high level and you do it consistently for the next few weeks, you will see some improvements in your performance over time. But it's not down to however many exercises you fit into the training session. And it's not down to throwing multiple reps and reps and reps and reps. It's down to the quality of what you're doing and down to intent that you bring to the execution. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of athletes bring to their gym work as well, in that I'll prescribe a range, as I've gone through previously, in terms of they might have 5 reps. They might have 2 to 5, 2 to 6 sets. Typically, they'll go for the larger ranges. One of my teams will anyway. And one of the other teams might go for the lower range in terms of sets. But what they're failing to realize is you can get more out of doing 3 purposeful sets with high intent than you will out of doing 6 rubbish sets that aren't pushed to the same intensity, that aren't the same quality of movement, and where you're just going through the motions and having a chat throughout the set. If you're having a chat with your teammate while you're executing a set, you're probably not pushing the intensity enough or the RPE enough. Fair enough if you're warming up, but even in your warm up, you should be focused in on what you're doing and trying to execute the movement to the necessary level and execute it how you need to execute it. And you're not going to be able to do that through disassociation and having a chat about something else. You need to focus in. So there's no point in being in the gym for an hour and an hour of rubbish when you could be in there for a half an hour and get a really good session in. And that's something that I've been talking about with my dual athletes of late, is when we get into the depths of the season, which is coming, where there's game after game after game, maybe 2 games in a week, and then no breaks and no reprieve whatsoever. And they are receptive to and interested in doing their gym sessions after their home games. Like, if you get in and get your minimum viable program done on that day afterwards, so 15 minutes after the final whistle, you're in the gym for 15 to 20 minutes and you get your gym work done there, then there's no need for you to come up for another 1 or 2 days, because you've exposed yourself to the training stimulus that is necessary to hopefully maintain the qualities that you've worked on over the preseason and reduce your risk of injury. As well as that, recovery and rest and switching off mentally as well as physically is going to be more optimal when you're going through that taxing season than getting up to the pitch every day out of the week. It can become a little bit repetitive, a little bit like Groundhog Day, and can lead to burnout. And it's something that I've dealt with myself in relation to my own work, in that last year, if you've listened to the podcast, I went through a period where I was trying to do so much and do so much work because I thought that that was the way to provide value, that the value of what I was doing was going down, and I was being an absolute prick because I was so burnt out, because I was at my wit's end, because I had no energy, because I wasn't feeling good in myself, because I thought everything was failing and it was my fault. So I had to push. Sometimes you need to be confident in what you're doing, execute it to the highest degree necessary, in the highest degree that you possibly can, but then leave it alone and just welcome what happens. And that's that mentality of abundance over fear, and thinking abundance and thinking that things will come to you and things will work out has been a lot more useful for me than the fear and pushing myself really, really hard to get everything done and get more done and work 7 days a week. And I'm weak if I'm not. And if I complain, I'm weak. And I don't need that amount of sleep. And I don't need to refill my cup and have a social life. I don't need to see my family that often. I don't need to see my friends that often. This is all that matters, and this is everything that I do. And there's parallels, as you can see, between that and what I went through as an athlete in the past in terms of my place kicking. The time spent away from your training and the time spent away from your work that you're doing is just as important, if not more important, than the work itself. So work hard, work smart, work diligently, most importantly, and work with purpose and focus. And then away from training, away from work, away from whatever you're doing, recover, rest, be confident in what you've done, trust your process, relax, have interests outside of what you're doing, enjoy yourself, and then get back rejuvenated, refreshed, and ready to focus in and put in high quality work again. And it's going to be much more useful for you, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a coach, whether you're just using this in your approach to your own corporate job, etc. It's going to work out better if you have that mindset and that approach than it is to constantly pushing and working 12, 14, 16 hours days and never switching off and never refilling your cup and never looking after yourself. You're going to be better for the people that you serve and better for the people that matter to you and the people that you are around and surrounding yourselves with if you do that than if you're too linearly focused, than if you are always pushing and you're not accepting that you can't have control over absolutely everything. You can only control so much. And a lot of what you can only control is the intent that you bring to what you do and working on what you can work on. Now, that's probably enough rambling for today. I hope you've seen some value in that short podcast. As with all of these podcasts, I don't really know if they're going to hit, if they're not going to hit, if it's going to resonate with you, if it's not. But I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you getting this far. I appreciate you showing interest in everything that we're doing here at PD Performance. We've seen some good growth in the last few months, which is awesome. We just passed 3,000 followers on Instagram, which is a decent milestone, but we're going to keep going. We're going to keep our mind on providing as much value and as much of a high quality service that we possibly can, accepting that we can't control whether that goes through. All we can control is the quality of what we're doing. And I'm sure if you've been listening to the podcast for quite some time, you'll probably have noticed a change in my approach, in that I'm having more time for myself. I'm having more time to invest in other things. And hopefully our clients, our athletes, our staff, the people that are working with me, are people that are consuming all of this content, are going to see a higher quality coming through in the next few months and in the coming years as well, because this is a long-term vision and we have a long-term mission, and we're going to stay focused and stay driven and stay diligent in all that we're doing. But we're going to enjoy the journey, and we're going to enjoy ourselves as we attempt to get there as well. So, as always, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. And if you did enjoy it, please remember to like it, share it, and send it.